Okay, this video is going to be on mathematical terminology, or what I like to call math words. And these are the terms that we're going to be covering, not necessarily in this order. But if you want to pause the video and write them down, like I have, because I'm about to erase them, then feel free to do so that you'll have a complete list of what we're going to be talking about. And we're going to start actually over here with sum and difference and product and quotient. So, let's start with our adding and subtracting words. Start with sum, as in S-U-M, sum. And what the sum is when we take two numbers, let's say 4 and 5, and we add them together, and it comes to be 9. So let me rewrite that a little bit. We add them together, and we get 9. 9 is our sum. So basically, and sum's not always 9, but sum is what you get when you add numbers together. You know, it doesn't matter if it's 2 numbers or 10 numbers that you're adding together. Your end result is called the sum. Now, the opposite of a sum is a difference. D-I-F-F-E-R-E-N-C-E. Difference. And that's when you get two numbers or more, and you subtract one from the other. And that end product is your difference. Now, again, we're just using simple examples with just two numbers, but it doesn't matter how many numbers you're subtracting. Your end product, or your end result, your end result is called the difference. Pretty intuitive that this number represents the difference between these two numbers. And that is then results on addition and subtraction. Now, when you get to multiplication, product, P-R-O-D-U-C-T, is when you have numbers, and again, it doesn't matter how many. We're just going to stick with 4 and 5 because that's nice, easy numbers. And you get a result. Your result is called a product. Again, it does not matter how many numbers you're multiplying together. As long as you're multiplying, the end result is called the product. And the reason we're going over these is sometimes you'll see questions raised and take the sum of and do this with it, or take the product of and do this with it. Now, you'll notice there's one major operation that we have not addressed yet, and that is division. And so, let me make sure I spell this correctly. The product of division, that's a U, is called the quotient. Q-U-O-T-I-E-N-T. And let's not use 4 and 5 because they don't divide very nicely. Didn't think all the way down to division when I chose that example. So, the result of your division is called, that's a 1, is called the quotient. Again, it doesn't matter how long your division is, how many numbers are involved, the end result is called a quotient. So, that's kind of a few basic arithmetic terms. I know that, like I said, sometimes you get a question that says use the difference of or take the quotient from, and you'll have to know what operation to perform to get to a sum or difference or product or quotient. So, next thing I want to talk about, we're going to move a little bit into algebra here, is variables. Now, a variable, when you think of variable, you think of X, Y, Z. And the truth is that a variable can be just about any letter. And what these letters are doing is taking the spot of a number that we don't know yet. And since they can have different values, it's not like, because if you have like 1, 2, 3, those have set values. But if you have a variable, you can have variable values. Now, within the same problem, a single variable can only hold one value inside of that problem. But when you go to the next problem, x could have a different value. That's why they're called variables. Now, to go along with variables comes our next term. Coefficient. And this one's a tricky one to spell. C-O-E-F-F-I-C-I-E-N-T. The first time I spelled it, I left out one of the I's. But what a coefficient is when you have a variable, like let's use y. Our number in black is our variable. Or the letter in black is our variable. You can have numbers with a set value coupled with those, like a 3. And this is your coefficient. And what that means is when you get a value for y, you multiply the two together. So let's, in this example, say that y is equal to 5. So we come in here and we have our 3, ready for multiplication. And then we multiply it times our now known value for y, which is 5, to give us 15 as our product. And again, this is important because when you get into having variables and getting actual values for them, you will need to multiply them by the coefficient. And there are lots and lots and lots of formulas that have setups like this with coefficients attached to variables. All right, shifting gears here just a little bit. And we're going to talk about, different color here. We're going to talk about factors. And I know that there's a video on factoring, and that's great. And y'all can go watch it if you want. I don't really, it doesn't really pertain to this, but when we have factors, what factors are is basically the numbers that can multiply together to make a number. Let's use, for our number, let's use 10. Now, if we're looking for the factors of 10, what are the factors of 10? Well, everything is a factor of itself when you multiply it times 1. So 10 and 1 are factors. But we know that we can also multiply 5 times 2 and get 10. So 5 and 2 are factors. So the factors of 10 are 1, 2, 5, and 10. Now, I just listed them in numerical order, but the easiest way to find your factors is to pair them in how that they go. And remember, since multiplication is what is known as commutative, which means it doesn't matter which way you arrange the numbers, you don't have to turn this around and say 1 times 10 because it equals the same thing as 10 times 1. So it doesn't give you any extra factors to do that. Now we're going to talk about kind of the reverse of factors next, which is multiples. And what a multiple is if you take a number and you start multiplying it by things. So again, we're going to use 10 as our base number, base 10 system, nice round base number. And what we start doing is multiplying 10 times stuff. And so we say 10 times 1 is 10. 10 times 2 is 20. 10 times 3 is 30. 10 times 4 is 40, etc., etc., etc. All these numbers over here are your multiples of 10. It's when you take your base number and start multiplying it times something, the products become your multiples of that number. And again, that comes important later when you're working out factoring and things like that. And as you get into some of the higher parts of algebra. Next thing, another basic math term. 2, actually, that we're going to couple together that trip up a lot of people. We're going to start. This has to do with fractions. Numerators and denominators. When you're looking at a fraction and they're talking about numerators and denominators, and this comes up a lot, especially when you start adding and subtracting fractions, you have to have a common denominator. Okay, the top number in a fraction is a numerator. The bottom number in a fraction is the denominator. Again, take a picture, pause it, write it down. This is very, very important and very, very easy to confuse. But remember, it's kind of hard to remember because they're in reverse alphabetical order. D comes before N. But if you remember LCD, the lowest common denominator, it'll remind you that that's the bottom number. At least that works for me. But this is very, very, very important, especially when you get into adding and subtracting fractions. There's a video on that if you want some more practice on this. And we're going to kind of continue with some algebraic terms and bring it back to a little bit lower mathematics. And the next word we're going to talk about is exponent. I know my handwriting is really, really bad. That's E-X-P-O-N-A-N-T. Exponent. Now, when we have an exponent, we're just going to have our base little number here, like 2. Let's say that we want to do 2 times 2 times 2. Well, you can go 2 times 2 is 4, 4 times 2 is 8, and have this whole little big old thing here written out. What else we can do is we got 1, 2, 3 2's. So we're just going to stick a little 3 right up there and say 2 cubed or 2 to the third. And so the subterms with exponents, when it's to the second power, is squared, and to the third power is cubed. Beyond that, you just say 4th, 5th, 6th, 85th power. But what this does here is tell us how many times over we're multiplying that number. If this was a 2, then our problem would look like this, where it's just 2 2's, which is 4. If that number was a 4, our problem would look like this. 1, 2, 3, 4 2's, because you just got to repeat this number this many times and multiply it out, and it comes out to be 8. We already know cubed is 8, and we just multiply that times 2 to get 16. And that's how exponents work, just kind of a brief explanation on that. Okay, one more term that gets people confused, because it's kind of a constant thing, is, let's put the color, percent and percentage. And when you have percent literally means for 100. That's 100, I promise. So anytime you're dealing in percentages, you're dealing in hundreds. Like if you had 10%, let's say we're talking about 10% of people like something. Well, that means for every 100 people, if I spell people, 10 of those people like something, because it's 10 out of every 100. That's what the percentage sign is telling us, is out of every 100. And the thing is, when we start getting statistics especially, it can get kind of confusing, because you may have 10%, although you're talking about 5,000 people. You know, what we're actually doing is taking that 5,000 and breaking it up into segments of 100, and that's what percentage does. So if you have any questions or any other terms that you would like to know the definition of, or that are confused by, or if you're confused by this video, throw it in the comments. I'll do my best to give you an answer.